Well, hi everybody. So today I'll be going over Carenado's Staggerwing. I'll show you how to start it up, how to take it off, and land it. And then I'll do a short review on it. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, well here we are in the Staggerwing here. It looks really good. I have absolutely no complaints about how it looks in here. The model and texture quality inside here are absolutely fantastic. So it looks great. Now the only thing I will say is that even though this is technically Carenado that made this, you kind of don't get the standard stuff that you get with Carenado. So you don't get their tablet, you don't get some of the other options that kind of come with the plane. You at least get the ability to roll the window down and open the rear door up here. The click point for the rear door to close it again, though, is kind of difficult to find. So, well, I'll just leave that open and find it later. One of the things I will say is that visibility in here is kind of poor. It's not necessarily a complaint. It's kind of just the plane itself. But one thing I did notice is that you can... I raised the camera height up here to 70 from the game options menu, or whatever. I think it's game options menu, which makes it a little bit easier to see. I also went outside the plane and kind of looked at, where the pilot kind of sits in here and what his eye level is, and this seems to be a little bit closer to where at least the model of the pilot, his eye level would be. So it seems like they have you sitting down kind of low, but that could be me. It's also just a really difficult plane to see out of, especially when you're here on the ground. But other than that, it looks fantastic in here, and I have no complaints. So go ahead and run through the instrument panel and get things started here. Alright, so starting up here in the left corner, we've got the airspeed indicator, attitude indicator, altimeter, turn slip coordinator, directional gyro, and climb indicator. Here in the center, we've got your flaps switch. I'm not going to call it a lever, it's not a lever. Propeller pitch, throttle. Then over here on the right side, we've got the CDI, manifold pressure, oil temperature, oil pressure and fuel pressure, landing gear indicator, flaps indicator, RPM gauge, fuel flow, a couple other things which you can cycle through by hitting this program button here. Cylinder head temperature, amp meter, vacuum gauge, and carburetor temperature. And then moving down here on the right side, we've got magnetos, your primer, which you don't really have to use. It's not necessary to actually get it started. Battery switch, avionics switch, pitot heat, fuel pump, starter, landing lights, exterior lights, interior lights, and alternator. And then we've got landing gear lever here, parking brake. For some reason this is labeled tail hook, but this is the tail wheel lock, carburetor heat, and mixture lever. And then over here on the left side we've got the radios. On the right side here, over on the side of the cockpit, we've got the fuel selectors. You have two of them. So this is, the top one is the main tank and the left upper tank, and then the bottom selector down here is the right upper tank and then the lower left and right tanks. You will actually have to switch this to the lower fuel valve here to get any of these tanks to work. So you could switch to any one of these tanks and it won't drain the fuel while you're flying unless you've actually selected the lower fuel valve. And then we have your pitch trim here on the yoke, on the column of the yoke here, this kind of chrome wheel. And then up here on the roof, we've got the rudder trim. And one thing I will say is that this light here actually does work, so you have to click on it. It's the sort of like red light for flying at night, but it does work. And that'll pretty much do it for everything in here, so we'll go ahead and get it started. Alright, so to get started here, we're going to want to make sure that the fuel selector is selected to the main tank. It should be by default, so it's probably not something you're really going to have to worry about. We'll go ahead and move the propeller pitch up to max, put the mixture up to rich, go ahead and turn the battery on, go ahead and turn the fuel pump on. We'll move the magnetos here over to both, and then we'll flip on the alternator. We'll go ahead and crack the throttle just a little bit, and then hit the starter button. Come back down here and turn on the avionics switch. And that's pretty much it. So we've got it running, and we'll go ahead and head out here to the runway and take it off. Alrighty. Well, one thing I am going to say is that I lowered the camera height down back to about 65 from 70. This bar here just makes it really hard to read the airspeed indicator. And even if you put it down at the default view, I think you won't really be able to see the needle until about 40 maybe 50 miles an hour. But as far as how the thing taxis, it's pretty easy to taxi. The difficulty in it comes from the fact that you can't really see anything. Now I will say it seems to kind of get away from you, and I'm not sure if that is because the plane itself is pretty easy to get away from you. It speeds up real quickly on the ground, or it's because I can't really see how fast I'm going. So, but other than that, it's not a difficult thing to taxi. It's just the visibility is bad. So, as far as how it behaves, it's pretty easy to control. It doesn't have a very tight turning radius or anything like that, but it's okay. So we'll go ahead here and take off. So we'll release the parking brake and throttle up. You probably won't lift the tail wheel off until about 20 miles an hour. And then after that, you just want to kind of pull back on the yoke. Not a lot, but a little bit. It should lift itself off here, maybe around like 70 miles an hour. So we'll go ahead and put the gear up. You won't need any flaps or anything like that for takeoff. It's pretty easy to get off the ground now. My runway is about 2,500 feet, and I tend to get off the ground a little bit past halfway down that. So it doesn't need too much space to take off, especially if you do put the flaps down. It gets off the ground pretty quickly. Now there isn't like a PDF manual that comes with this thing, so anything I tell you about how to fly this thing is actually coming from me, and not necessarily, I guess, how you might actually fly this thing in real life, or how you would properly fly it. So it just comes from me messing around with it and figuring out what works. Now it is pretty quick. I will say that it does get going. You can cruise to, you do cruise at about 200 miles an hour in this thing. Now the thing that I'm not 100% sure about is there's a red line on the manifold pressure down there just above 25. And in order to get it to do 200 knots, or sorry, 200 miles an hour, you're going to have to pass that red line. And again, it doesn't have a manual, but I tend to think that going past red lines is not good. So, or at least going past them for very long isn't really good. So, you will have to exceed that red line to get it to do 200. Now, as far as stall speed, it looks like something around about 48 miles an hour with the flaps up, and you're looking at something like the high 30s, low 40s for when they're down. Now, as far as how it flies, it's a really well-behaved plane. It's really nice and stable. You don't really have to worry about anything, and it's reasonably fun to fly. I'm not entirely sure how realistic it is, but the only thing I will say is that landing this thing I do find to be quite difficult. Not in the sense that it's I guess difficult is the wrong word. It's really bouncy, and I've had a lot of trouble actually doing a wheeled landing in this thing. So we'll see how this goes when I get back around to the field here to land. But I would say that if you're probably looking for something that's incredibly realistic in terms of its flight model, this probably is not it. I think the draw to this plane is kind of more that it looks really good, and you know, it's a Staggerwing, so. Alright, so we'll come in here for a landing, and we'll see how this goes. I haven't had all that much success with landing it. So, we'll go ahead and we'll want to be below 110 to put the flaps down. Now, there isn't any damage on this plane, so you won't damage it if you put them down before that, or the landing gear or anything like that, but we'll try and follow what's on the dash up there. So, now it doesn't like to slow down. It really doesn't. So we'll go ahead and we've finally gotten below 110. We'll put the landing gear down and drop the flaps. You're probably going to want to come in here at about 70 miles an hour. Now, I'm still a little iffy on this one, but it seems like if you leave a little bit of power in it when you're actually landing, it makes it a little bit easier to land. So don't go down to like 0 throttle on it as you're getting over the runway. But it still is pretty difficult to see, which also might be part of my problem here when it comes to landing, is that I'm not entirely sure where I actually am and when the wheels are actually going to touch down on the ground. So, but we'll go ahead and reduce the throttle. You should probably touch down around about maybe 50, 45 or 50, and you probably will hit the stall warning. But not that bad of a bounce. So go ahead and pull the yoke back to ground the tail wheel. It does have pretty good brakes. So it's at least got that going for it. The one thing I have forgotten to mention that is don't if you reduce the propeller pitch down to its minimum and put it on let's say 0 throttle here, it will kill the motor. So there we go. So it kills the motor when you have the propeller pitch all the way down and to that and the throttle down to 0. So that's pretty much it. So we'll go ahead and go into the review here, and that'll be it for today. Alrighty, so you can pick up the Staggerwing from the Microsoft Flight Simulator Marketplace. It's $14.99. So it's really not that expensive. It's pretty cheap. So I'll start here with what I think is really the high point of the plane, which is its texture and model quality. It's from Carenado, so you can expect, very high quality visuals, and it certainly doesn't disappoint. The exterior looks fantastic. It has some subtle wear and tear on it, mostly on the underside of the plane, behind the engine cowling and the exhaust and everything, which you won't really see if you do use one of the black paint schemes, but it is there. The engine, landing gear, and everything else are modeled and textured really well. The interior is, in all honesty, not any different than the exterior, and it looks fantastic as well. So, again, it's pretty much what I think is the high point of this plane, is how it looks. The sound quality is really pretty good. It's close enough, at least to the real thing, I think, to not really be a problem. It's not perfect, but it's by no means bad. There is a weird sound if you're in the exterior view and you put the landing gear down. The noise, I guess, of the gear door opening up or something. Either way, whatever it is, it sounds like a camera shutter. The switches and all the other stuff don't sound completely generic, which is always a good sign. I didn't notice anything that you could click on that at the very least didn't make a noise. One of the things I did think that was neat about the sound effects, though, was that the airframe will creak under stress, which I think is always kind of a nice touch. But overall, the sound quality is good. Now, the flight model, I'm not really sure about. I don't know too much about the Staggerwing and how it should behave, but I tend to think it's not that realistic just because it's only about $15. What I will say is that I've had a pretty difficult time actually landing it. It seems to have a hard time sitting down, and it is quite bouncy when you're trying to do a wheeled landing. Now, some of that could be me. In all honesty, it really could be. This one doesn't have a PDF manual that comes with it, which is usually something I use to kind of cut down my learning curve on a new plane. So it might just be that I haven't flown it enough. But I just don't want you to go into this thinking that this is a perfect representation of the Staggerwing's flight characteristics, and even if it was, I really wouldn't be able to tell you either way. But overall, I think it's a pretty decent one. I've been enjoying it. I've been flying around. But if you're looking for something that's incredibly realistic, this probably is not what you're really looking for. It's not very complex. Not that it's a complex plane in the first place, but there isn't any engine damage or anything like that. It's just a standard Microsoft Flight Simulator damage system, so you won't have to worry about overheating anything or anything like that. But if you're looking for something that looks cool and is fun to fly and it's pretty cheap, then this is pretty much that plane. So I will say I'm probably going to be flying it around for a while, even if it's just to figure out how to land it better. But I do like it, and it is fun. So that's pretty much going to be it for today, everybody. So thanks for watching.